I need chopsticks for pasta, for salad, and even like steak. I eat with chopsticks and a steak knife.
Okay, so could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I have been in Japan for a while. I'm originally from California. I came to Japan, I think in 2005. Came here to Kurashiki, lived here for 3 years. And my wife is from Shimane. I've been in Shimane for 14 years. I like it here. I can't picture living anywhere else.
Did you find anything difficult in Japan?
For English speakers, it's difficult to learn the language. So I focused hard on learning Japanese for 3 years. I spent 5 hours a week in private lessons, and then I spent probably 20 hours a week studying by myself and doing like a lot of shadowing and just trying to do anything I can to learn how to speak. Once my Japanese level got good or better, then I felt like life here is a little bit easier. You want to say hi? Hi. Hey. Okay. My daughter and my son. You want to say something? Okay, go with mommy. Go with mommy. See you, dude. I'll see you in a little bit. I think in Japan it's hard to do much if you don't speak Japanese, especially if you're living here. If you're traveling, there's people will help you, and there's English signs like all over the country, and there's English explanations if you look, or you can check online. But when you live here, you need the language to do anything. Like if you're going to look for an apartment or hook up the internet or things like that, you need to be able to talk on the phone in Japanese. Another difficult thing about living here, after having lived here for a long time, I feel like this is my home. I feel like people still think I'm a tourist. So for example, often people are surprised I can use chopsticks, but I could use chopsticks even before I came to Japan. I've been using them daily for the last 18 years. And so even I bring chopsticks with me when I go home to California, because I don't like using a fork. I don't like putting metal in my mouth. I need chopsticks for pasta, for salad, and even like steak. I eat with chopsticks and a steak knife. But in some ways, I'm not at all Japanese. I have no problem sticking my chopsticks in my rice when I carry my bowl. And I know that like at funerals in Japan, I've been to funerals in Japan, and I know like chopsticks are stuck in rice at the funeral. Japanese people, when they see that, they think of death and they think of funerals, and it's kind of cringe for them. But for me, it doesn't bother me at all. So basically, when I'm with other people, I don't do that. But when I'm alone, I just stab my chopsticks into my rice and carry my rice around the house. In Japan, the kids learn very specific ways to clean at school. And so I think there's like a standard way to clean everything in Japan in general. How you wipe the floor or clean the table or something, there's a specific way of doing everything. I use my own style. So for example, when I clean my table, I use a sponge and put soap on it. I clean the table with soap, and then I use a wet towel to clean it up. I don't clean the table that often, but when I do, that's what I do. And my Japanese friends are usually shocked that I do that.
How many other languages do you speak?
I've studied like ancient Greek, ancient Hebrew, modern Spanish, French, Portuguese, Italian, and Japanese.
What's it like to live in Shimane?
All right, I'll talk about the positives first. Like there's a lot of nature, a lot of outdoors stuff in Shimane. I've enjoyed like going camping, like going to parks. My kids love to go to the park, and there's a lot of good parks there. It's kind of a slower life. There's not a lot of crowded places. And there's a lot of chances to talk to people. It's easier to like talk to neighbors or talk to people you meet in I think in the countryside anywhere in the world. It's really safe there. Maybe it's safe all over Japan, but it feels really safe in Shimane. I think it's cheaper to live in the countryside. The hard part, I think, is there's a lot of people maybe all over Japan who are not used to foreigners. And maybe have never had a close friend who's a foreigner. In the countryside, it's even more that way. So when I'm in a group, it always makes my presence makes some people feel awkward. I think it's less that way now than it was 10 or 14 years ago when I first moved there. Now there's more foreigners in Japan. There's other foreigners living in my town. There's more travelers. But yeah, I think there's like an awkwardness that a lot of people experience when they're around a foreigner, especially in the countryside. I think it's even more that way. Stuff like the neighborhood groups, the jijikai, they're more intense in the countryside is what I've heard. I like talking with other people. I don't mind cutting grass. We meet to cut grass twice a year. I just don't like, I guess, the obligation of having to go to a meeting, having to use my own time to go to a group and talk about stuff that really doesn't have much to do with me. I don't enjoy that. So actually, I don't go to the groups right now. In case anyone from my neighborhood's watching, sorry. But I do cut grass. I do help with like the actual work. I don't want to be involved in the politics. I think like the hardest experience I've had in Shimane is like, which I think is not as common now, but when I went to look for an apartment or to rent a house, I found places online myself. I want to check out this house and this house and this house. So we go to a real estate agent, a real estate agency, and I tell them, these are the places I want to check out. And then the real estate agent said, actually, they don't rent to foreigners. And I do understand, like, there's language barriers, there's cultural barriers that some people don't want to deal with. So I can understand, like, the reason for that. But it's still kind of, it hit. I've immigrated to Japan. I've totally naturalized, except I don't have Japanese citizenship, but I feel naturalized culturally into Japan's culture and society. But that's kind of a reminder that I'm different. There's a barrier there. And so it kind of hurt. I wouldn't consider that racism. I know some of my friends feel like that's racism. I consider racism to be hate towards foreigners. And I think people with that policy, that's not the intention. It's they want to avoid problems. Oh, I almost forgot. Yeah, you know Rafkadio Han, right? Koizumi Yakumo. He's like the most famous foreigner that lived in Matsue, and where I live. There's a museum for him. He translated a bunch of ghost stories, and like he's so famous, but he was only there for 2 or 3 years. And the reason he left was the weather. It's worth mentioning that the weather in Shimane, it's not like Okayama, Hare no Kuni, as opposed to Sain, cloudy, rainy, Ame no Kuni. Weather is like something I don't think I'll ever get used to. When we were renting our house, I wasn't aware of how bad mildew and mold could be. So I had a bunch of stuff stored in the closet for probably a year. And then like a year later, I took everything out and everything was just ruined. There was mold growing on everything. In the rainy season, especially like waking up all sweaty every day, I hate that. Weather, I think, is probably the hardest part about living in Shimane. And that's maybe the main reason Koizumi Yakumo left.
Do you miss anything from the US?
A lot of times people ask me that question. So I always answer like food. I love the food in Japan. And when I go to the US, I miss the food in Japan. But I miss I love Mexican food. So I miss that. I like American beef more because there's less fat. You can eat American steak every day because of the low fat. It's not really bad for you, I think. But actually, the thing I miss the most is I think that there's a little bit less communication in Japan. There's less opportunities to talk to people you don't know. So like when I go out in the States, I always talk to people on the bus or the train. It's fun to meet new people all the time. And I think in a lot of other places in the world, people do that. But in Japan, I feel very isolated a lot of the time. Like there's not a lot of chances for that. When I go back to the States, I'm talking to people constantly. I like to talk, as you can probably tell from this interview.
Do you talk to Westerners when you see them?
Oh, that's a good question. I didn't before. But now I think I want my kids to hear me speak English. I want them to be around English speaking. So it's made me want to make more foreign friends or English speaking friends. And so because of that, now I'm more used to like trying to talk to people in English. So now when I see foreigners, I do initiate conversation with them. Come up and talk to me. I'll probably have a shocked like, what are you doing? Look on my face initially, but just tell me you watch this channel, and then I'll turn my frown into a smile. If you're interested in speaking English and you're interested in interacting with foreigners, especially a lot of the travelers that come to Japan, I think they're interested in talking with people. They only know what they've seen online or maybe a travel magazine. If you have some kind of recommendation for them, or if they look like they need help with directions, if you offer some kind of help, I think people appreciate not only the help, but just a chance to communicate with people while they're traveling. So don't be shy. Try talking with foreigners. And for foreigners watching this channel, it's cheaper to travel in Japan now. So if you haven't come to Japan, come to Japan. It's a great time to come to Japan. But also be aware that there's been a lot of news lately of disrespectful foreigners. There's been people doing things that are not appropriate in Japan. And if you do something that's inappropriate in the States, for example, somebody will tell you, stop doing that. But in Japan, it's not normal for somebody to warn somebody or to make somebody aware that they're overstepping cultural norms or they're breaking cultural norms. Try to learn about what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. And watch people's reaction, because they won't tell you with words, but they might look at you strangely if you're doing something inappropriate. Japanese words that you've heard from anime or that you've learned from somewhere that are kind of strong language. If you've learned some strong language, then you can maybe use that with a friend jokingly, but don't get angry at somebody and use strong language. It comes across as not very cool, not cool at all. When people see that, they don't want you here. They don't want you to come to Japan. So just be polite, be respectful, enjoy. This place is awesome for traveling.
Do you have anything to say as promotion?
If you're interested in listening to a podcast, I'm going to be releasing a podcast called Whatever Japan. My Australian friend and I are going to talk about life in Japan. It's all English, and it's really for people who haven't come to Japan, who are interested in what it's like to live in Japan as a foreigner. But yeah, if you'd like to listen to it to practice English, or you're interested in foreigners' opinions about their life in Japan, then yeah, check it out. Whatever Japan podcast.
Thank you.
All right, yeah, thanks for the interview.